Shabbat shalom. We can take our seats. Shabbat shalom. So a few weeks ago, we started reading from the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, which is the middle book of the Torah, right? We've got 5 books, and this is the middle. So now I sound very loud. And this week, we come to the actual middle of the Torah in word count. So there's a few different ways of counting the middle of the Torah, but if we count the words of the Torah from the beginning or the end through to the middle, we find the very middle of the words of the Torah in this week's Parsha, which is Shmini. And the words that we find right in the middle are darosh darash, which means sort of inquiring to inquire. It's the same word that we use when we say that we're giving a drash, an interpretation on the Torah, or when we're telling midrash, rabbinic stories or creative stories about the Torah. Darosh darash, right in the middle of the Torah. And if we were counting by letter, not necessarily by word, but by letter, we would come to the middle, not even in the same place at all, but actually in the next chapter, and it's a vav, right in the middle. The very middle letter is the Hebrew letter vav in the word belly, the middle of the middle. In a few more chapters after that, we find the word vehit galach, which means that the priest or the person that is talking about is supposed to shave themselves. Vehit galach, and that is the midpoint in terms of verses. So there's a few different ways of counting. So we counted by words to come to darosh darash. We counted by letters to come to the middle of the middle. And if we're counting by verses, we come to this verse about somebody shaving themselves. So we're really like in the middle in lots of different ways, all in this parsha. But if we focus on this idea of darosh darash, right in the middle of the word count, one translation turns it into, says, inquired. Yes, inquired. Inquired, yes, inquired. It's like this doubling, not just inquiry, but like really deep inquiry. Working to inquire, looking deeper in. It's emphatic, it's doubled. Darosh darash, in these two different forms that call our attention. What is being inquired? What are we being invited to inquire here? And it's interesting because we're talking at the middle of the Torah. Lately, we've been talking about the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And in the middle of the Mishkan, we have the Holy of Holies, the most holy space that existed at that time, right in the middle of the Mishkan. And so middles are sacred. When we go deep into something, it can be, we can sometimes find sort of that, if you think about like going deep into a forest or deep into yourself, right? We kind of have to go deep sometimes to find that holiness or that quiet. And sometimes we're inquiring of ourselves in those spaces. Darosh darash, this deep inquiry in the middle of Torah that we're being invited into. And there's a ethical teaching here as well. In the Psalms, there's a verse that also takes this same root of the word darash, darosh, darash, inquiring. And it's actually flipping it around. It's talking about an evildoer, somebody who isn't doing the right things in life. And it says, the wicked and arrogant as they are, do not inquire. Yidrosh, do not inquire, same root. So there's something about inquiry that's being given a value, that if we are inquisitive, perhaps that is going to lead us to good places. And somebody who doesn't think to inquire could end up following the wrong path in life. So there's this sort of association between wickedness or arrogance and not taking the time to darosh darash, to do that deep inquiry. And the verse from Psalms keeps going. It says that those people who don't take the time to yidrosh, to inquire, have lost their relationship with God and are subsequently described as having their nose at a height. The Hebrew is kegavoa apo, like turning up your nose, right? Biblical, all the way back, right? It's such human nature that it's right there in the Psalms, right? This idea of turning your nose up at something, right? Not being bothered to inquire, maybe thinking you're too good for it. So the Torah portion this week, as one of my colleagues writes, reminds us not to stick our noses into the air, but instead stick our noses right where they belong. We should be nosing into our own business and always examining our own behavior. So this idea of darosh darash, it's not that the Torah is inviting us to inquire what other people are doing, but it's this internal darosh darash. What are we up to? Are we conducting ourselves correctly? Are we following Torah? Are we following the ways that we think God wants us to live our lives? And the rabbis talk about this more in the Talmud. Alexander said to the elders, "Who is truly worthy of being called wise?" And they said, citing a tradition, "Who is the wise person? The one who sees and anticipates the consequences of their behavior." Again, turning inward. Darosh darash, looking into our own middle to inquire of ourselves, not to inquire of other people, whether they're living their lives the way they should be, but are we living our lives the way we should be? And so this Shabbat, when we think about what is right at the middle of Torah, an invitation to look into ourselves and inquire of ourselves, darosh darash, may we be reminded that even when we're in the middle of things, to pay attention to our own intentions, our own selves.